Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to the launch of the State of the Sector report in private schools in India. We hope that this report will focus attention on India's private school sector, including on some of the issues caused by COVID-19. We will have an introductory session where we launch the report, and this will be followed by two panel discussions. So before we start, some quick housekeeping issues. So one, we're putting all participants on mute by default. However, you'll be able to send questions to panelists using the Q&A function that you'll see in the bottom panel of the Zoom window. We'll also be monitoring the Q&As throughout the session and we'll pass on the questions to respective moderators. We'll be requesting all panelists to switch on their video before they start speaking. So you'll see like a message popping out in the center of your screen asking you to switch on your video. And then the launch of this report is also being live streamed on all social media channels of CSF, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. You can tweet the key highlights from the launch using the hashtag State of Private Schools. So to kick things off, I'd like to invite Ashish Dhawan to deliver the welcome address. As you all know, he's the founder and chairman of Central Square Foundation and a founding member of Ashoka University. So handing over to Ashish now.
Thank you, Ruchika. Welcome, everyone. I'm delighted to announce the launch of the Private Schools in India report. Omidyar Networks India and Central Square Foundation have worked together on this. I think it's extremely important for us to look at private schools, and particularly with a data-driven approach. So when we worked on this report, the idea was really to pull together from a variety of different sources and create a comprehensive report to look at the state of private schools in India without having bias of any sort creep in. I think we try to be as objective as possible as we look at this issue. I think this issue is extremely salient at this point. As is evident from the report, 47.5% of children in India as of the last data being published. And as of today, more likely 50% of children attend private school. There are 16 states where half the children go to private school, or more than half. In the case of Goa, it's 80+% of children. In urban India, it's almost 3/4 of children who attend private schools. And if we are to succeed, we have abysmal learning levels in India right now. If we are to succeed as a country, we need both private schools and government schools to perform, because it's almost a 50-50 equation at this point in time. This is a very important time to also understand the sector, because with COVID, there is an impact. There's likely to be reduced enrollment in the near term. There's a pressure on families, as is pointed out in the report, particularly, given the fee points are quite low. 70% of children attend schools that with fees of monthly fees of 1,000 or lower. But having said that, it still constitutes a meaningful percentage of the family's disposable income. And so in the midst of COVID, there's a pressure on enrollment. Private schools also have issues with regards to collections. So those are really important issues. And we feel there's much more that needs to be done in terms of research with regards to the private school space. It's quite shocking as to how under-researched this space is, because on a standalone basis, if you look at 120 million children, 12 crore children going to private schools, it's the third largest system in the world on a standalone basis. And much more needs to be done. I mean, if you look at something like aided schools, which have been around forever, we have no solutions in terms of how we can improve learning outcomes there. Even in terms of the private system, there's very little objective work on what the regulatory framework needs to look like, what the role of government needs to be, and how we create the right incentives for private schools to perform and improve learning outcomes, what role parents can play, the information asymmetry issues, etc. So this State of the Sector report is only the beginning. Central Square Foundation is building a body of work around the private schools, and will also work with state governments to implement a number of these issues. And we hope to continue to partner with Omidyar Networks going forward on this issue. So with that quick introduction, it's my a pleasure to announce Mr. Amitabh Kant ji as the keynote speaker. All of us know him. He's the CEO of Niti Aayog, and I'm delighted that he's agreed to address all of us. So welcome, Amitabh ji. Oops, he hasn't come. Ruchika, should we reverse the order? Or will you call Mr. Kant's office?
Yes, so we'll coordinate with his office. Sorry. But we can reverse the order. While
You
we
want to go with video first?
Yeah, we can go with the video first. Yes, yes.
Okay,
just give us a second to coordinate. Yes, yes. Is the video audio?
The audio is not on.
Audio is not on stage.
Yeah, we are ready for Mr.
Yes.
Kant. We're waiting.
Yeah, Kant is on the way. He will reach in 1 or 2 minutes.
Welcome, Amitabh ji. How are you?
Fine, fine. How are you?
Good. I've already made my introductory remarks, so I'd like
apologies
to
for being late.
No problem. I'd like to just welcome you. Thank you for taking out the time. As you know, we're very excited to launch this report, Omidyar Networks India and Central Square Foundation. I hope you've had the chance to glance through it, and I'll turn it over to you to make the opening remarks, to deliver the keynote.
Congratulate the Central Square Foundation for this very unique work that it is doing, and this is a great report. I was really fascinated by this on the state of the sector report of private schools in India, which is very, very critical to my mind, because the school education system in India, which is the largest in the world and caters to over 260 million young people each year, the private sector plays a very critical role, and therefore getting it right as far as the key principles is very important. And the key principles, to my mind, driving these efforts by both government and private sector alike have to be the principles of access, equity, quality of education. The private school sector actually has played a very major role in this country, and today the private unaided schools the unaided ones cater to nearly 40% of the total students in the K-12 school education segment. I mean, this is an enormous number, 40%. And their contribution, and this is all private unaided schools, and their contribution towards access or universalization of education is to be, to my mind, duly credited, which quite often in government and in the political system we do not realize. But without the role of the private sector, it is not possible to provide education, good quality education across India. And the private school sector is also contributing their part towards equity of education under Section 12(1)(c) of the RTE Act. Many states have done exemplary work in ensuring filling of the 25% EWS seats, the economically weaker section seats in private schools. The provision is, to my mind, a progressive step in the long term, where young ones of the two sections of the society get to know and empathize with each other. And it's very important that while we implement this, the school management, the teachers, students from other segments all have to ensure that there is adequate empathy built in. When these young ones occupy power of positions in future, they would all work towards nation building with equity and quality as the guiding factors. I, however, feel that a lot needs to be done on this front, both from the government side and the private school sector side. The various state governments will have to ensure timely release of funds to private schools which are catering to EWS students. This is quite often not done, and this puts a huge strain. At the same time, the private sector needs to ensure that the mandated 25% seats are duly filled up, and this is also not done quite often. And the larger purpose of the provision must be implemented in both in accordance with the existing law and in spirit. Another very important issue pertains to the quality of education in private sector, and there is a spectrum of private schools with varying quality. The other reports clearly show that though enrollment in private school has increased exponentially, the learning outcomes have stagnated for more than a decade now. And in quite a few states, actually, what we find is that government schools have been, as far as learning outcomes are concerned, are showing marked improvement. Delhi is one place, Kerala is another, where they have started showing better improvement over the private school. And therefore, this is a big challenge to the private schools, that they have to really focus on learning outcomes, not on buildings, not on many other infrastructural issues, but to ensure that learning outcomes improve. And this is critical, because what we are finding is that a class 8 student is not able to do class 2 maths and his own mother tongue, and this is while 15 to 20% of the students are able to absorb everything. A very major segment keeps passing and passing and passing, and therefore over a long period of time we are doing huge damage to the entire education system unless and until learning outcomes do not improve. Therefore, there is a need to shift from monitoring of inputs to really monitoring of outcomes. And since education is a state subject, various governments need to rethink of their regulatory framework on private schools. And focus should be laid more on learning outcomes rather than only on inputs. And to my mind, this is really the paradigm shift that we need to make. Go back, focus back on learning outcomes rather than any inputs. One of the novel approaches which would revolutionize the private school is bringing an accreditation system in the private school sector. And I am a strong votary of this, that there must be a system of accreditation. This system would recognize schools on the basis of quality, similar to what NAC does in the higher education sector. This information should be made public, put out in public domain, so that parents can take a very, very informed decision while choosing a private school. And to my mind, this will bring in a huge amount of transparency in the functioning of private schools. And over a period of time, all parents will actually know how well a school is functioning. Niti Aayog has started working in this direction. Working paper on state model regulatory framework will be published to inform various state governments in bringing quality and parity in private school sector through regulatory changes. And we will be delighted to work with the Central Square Foundation on this. The other key issue is about private schools, that while private schools run extremely well, there is a need for preschool education to be inbuilt. And this is very important because the mind of a young child really makes a radical difference before he joins the school. So we are the age from 3 to 6 is very critical. Mr. Ashish Dhawan has been focusing on this, and I'm totally a believer in this. What he has been advocating, that preschool education is critical, and therefore private schools must build this as a part of the education system. And with these few words, I congratulate all of you for this excellent report. We in Niti Aayog will be very delighted to work hand in hands with you, work in partnership with you to take all the recommendations of this report forward in a big way. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Kant. Really appreciate your insights and your support for the report. I'd request you to stay on. We have a short 3-minute video which summarizes the report, and turn it over to my colleagues to just play that video right now.
India's private school system is the third largest school system in the world with 12 crore students. That's nearly 50% of India's school-going children. Most students attend low-fee schools with 70% paying less than rupees 1,000 per month. Despite such low fees, the aggregate household spend on private unaided schooling is approximately rupees 1.75 lakh crore. This large-scale enrollment and spending is because 73% of parents with children in private schools believe these schools will provide a better learning environment. However, in the absence of metrics to assess quality of education, parents choose schools based on factors like English medium or school infrastructure. This is why private schools invest more in inputs than on learning outcomes. 60% of rural private school students in class 5 cannot solve a simple division problem, and 35% cannot read a basic class 2 level paragraph. There is also a lack of policy focus on learning. Private school owners are required to meet input-related requirements which are contextually unfit but not mandated to deliver quality learning. For example, the minimum land requirement for secondary CBSE schools is 1600 square meters in space-constrained metropolitan cities like Delhi. Did you know that opening a private school in Delhi requires a set of 125 documents? So how do we ensure better learning outcomes for students attending private schools? 1. Create a universal learning indicator to help parents compare quality of education across schools based on key stage assessments. 2. Develop an accreditation framework that factors in constraints of low-fee schools and state capacity to implement. 3. Review non-profit mandate and existing fee regulations to attract investment and enable easy access to credit. And 4. Establish an independent regulatory agency for the private school sector. We need sectoral reforms if we want to improve the learning outcomes for our children.
Great. Thank you. I'd like to now turn it over to my friend Mohandas Pai, who's a public intellectual and also the chairman of the Manipal Education Group. Mohan, over to you.
Thank you very much, Ashish. I want to compliment Center Square Foundation and OMDR for this great report. I've been studying the school system for the last 20 years, but I must say I'm very impressed with the quality of the report and the comprehensive data and analysis that's been made into this report. What is very revealing is the fact that in 2017, nearly 50% of India's students in schools were in private schools. And government-led education has come down from 74% to 50% over the last 15 years. And this shows that parents are making a choice. In a democracy, there are two important things that define our society: the freedom of choice and the freedom of choices. So today, parents are making a choice of sending their children to private schools, despite the government creating capacity and spending enormous amounts of money. The last time I saw the data, governments are spending something like 5 lakh crore rupees on school education alone, all across the country. But why are parents making this choice, knowing that they can go to a government school and they can get free education? They're making a choice as per the report, primarily because they believe the learning outcome will be much better. They're also making a choice because they believe in English medium education, because they believe that English as a language will help the child get a better job as things go by. In many states and many government schools, English is not even taught as a language in the primary schools. And if you look at data again, the cost of private schools for 45% of people less than 500 rupees a month, and for about 75% odd is less than 1,000 rupees a month. So it's not that private schools are more expensive all over. When we think of a private school, we only think of the elite exclusive schools where possibly we send our children and do pay a lot of money at this point of time. But the fact remains the great majority of private schools have come up all across India due to demand and due to the fact that parents believe in them. The cost of educating a child in a government school is around 25,000 rupees a year, which all of us pay through our taxes. So I do think that the time has come for the government to accept the reality and as a democracy, accept that parents have the right to make a choice and not force things upon the parents. Now in school education, as in higher education, the government has three roles. One is to make policy for everybody, policy to benefit all citizens of this country. Second is to make sure that they set up a regulatory system which will be obeyed by all the players in any system. And the third is to provide public services. Now, when government makes a policy all across India, in almost all states, we find that they're very harsh on the private sector and they make a policy believing that only the government can do certain things. Even we have seen in the past that the Department of Telecom or the Department to manage BSNL and the Department of Civil Aviation before they opened up was the Department to manage Air India. So most governments think that the school department policy should be tuned only for government schools. Second, we need independent regulators who will hold every provider to the same standards. Today, government schools are not held to the same standards. We have read of so many government schools having 0 passes in the 10th standard. We've seen the ASER report in rural India that many of the schools have very bad outcome for children. Not that private schools have a better outcome, they're slightly better, but parents believe they're much better. I'm not talking about the elite urban schools. And you can see that in urban areas, 73% of school children are in private schools, with more than 8 to 9 states having the majority of students in private schools all over. So we need a regulatory system which does not discriminate, which lays down standard, which is away and independent of the government, so people know. And this regulatory system should create an information which can be available to parents so they can assess whether the school they're sending the children to is kosher, it meets the bill, has the facilities, has been regulated. The next important point is that if the government is the provider of school education, they must be held to the same standard. And I think it's very important that they held to the same standard, because when you spend 25,000 rupees from taxpayers' money for every student, and the student doesn't get a good education, somebody has to pay for it. You can't have teachers and inspectors and the whole rigmarole not doing the work, because the future of a society depends upon how we educate the children. And if you're all taxpayers, our money is used as the public good to pay for school education, I think they must meet the criteria, which is not happening today. And we are also seeing all over this country that this can possibly go up as time goes by, because in urban areas, 73%. So what should the future be? We believe, I'm sure Ashish and his team also believe, and all of us believe, that in the future, government should have a policy which will take care of all the young children in this country, and not only children in government schools. Second, we need an accreditation system. We need a regulatory system which will lay down norms which are available. You can't have norms which go against setting up a school. I'm told in Delhi, it requires 175 permission to set up a school. And the norm should also be output-based, not input-based. Today, all the norms are input-based. So much of space, so much of classroom, so much of infrastructure, etc. But they don't have the norms. What should the output be? Because many of the private schools also don't go to class 10 for regulatory reasons. We need the output norms where schools are assessed on the output. What is the output of education of a child? Does the child meet the bill? So we require a universal standard to be set for all the schools. And then we need also some reforms in the way the schools are funded. We need school voucher programs so the poor have a choice. Today we see from this report and data that the poor are disproportionately in government schools because they're poor. And if the government schools don't perform, you are creating a greater barrier between the middle class and the richer classes and the poor. Because the poor who go to government schools don't get a good education despite a high cost. in future in the knowledge society, the children will not be able to do well. And that is not acceptable in a democracy like India. So I think it's important that government creates a level playing field. And one of the things to do is to also have for-profit schools. Now, government should have a policy where they depend upon the output and the outcome of the student rather than whether it's for profit or not for profit. So many countries have opened up the school system because they're all saying what we want is good education. Whether you are for profit, you are for a trust, we don't care, because the end of it will judge you based upon output. So I think we need better reforms. We need reforms to focus on output. We need reform for accreditation. We need an independent regulatory authority. We need to remove the distinction between profit and not for profit. And we need the RTI to be strengthened too. The RTI for the private school is a good mechanism to bring in diversity. And there's a very important issue here, which many of us need to understand. A school should reflect the diversity of society. If you send your child to a school where only the upper classes come, a certain class come, your children will grow up not knowing what kind of society India is. Will they be able to live in a society where there's so much of differences, so much of diversity? Because that is the future of the world. And therefore, the school should reflect the diversity of society. I studied in a school where there were children who were laborers, whose parents were laborers, bus conductors, school teachers, businessmen, etc. And all of us grew up together, and we did not know the disturb anybody. And today, my hero still is the school football stadium, who was the son of a butcher. When I meet him and tell him, you are my hero, he looks at me with amazement and says, Mohan, you are my hero, you've done so well. But to me, he's a hero because he's been a hero throughout my life. So we have to create this network where all of us can live together. And that's why the RTA has to be revamped. And for revamping, government has to keep the bargain. Government has to pay the schools for educating the children, because the schools cannot run on charity. Private schools can't run on charity because nobody is giving them charity. They're fee-based. And the government says, take 25% of students. I think the government has to pay. We learn with horror that very large number of schools haven't got money for a very number of years. So I just want to end by saying I'm delighted to read this report. I think for the first time, India has a full report with a lot of data across states, with outcome and with the kind of reforms that are required to reform schools. And for any society, any civilization, educating young children in school is the most important thing that you can do. Giving a child, and every child in every country, a good education is the greatest thing society can do to make sure its future will be brighter and the future will be more prosperous. And today, India is not failing. And as a democracy, we have to give parents the choice, because parents have the interest of the child, not government, not anybody else. And parents are making a choice that, look, I want to go to a school where I believe my child will get a better education. Whether that's borne out by facts or not, we have to judge. But we cannot ignore the choices made by parents. And today, the majority of parents appear to make a choice for private schools. So we need reforms. We need a policy which treats public and private schools equally. And the reforms have to be focused on output. And I want to thank now Ashish Dhawan of Center Square Foundation and Rupa Kudwa of Omdiyar for the wonderful report. I do hope Niti Aayog and the government will take cognizance and we'll see great reforms in future, because I believe to build the India of our dreams, the India that our founding fathers promised to us in a constitution, to which all our political leaders across all states want to achieve, we must focus on good school education. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mohan. Thank you for those comments. I think both Mr. Kant and you have emphasized the role that private schools have played and in helping the massification of education. I mean, it's now we have near universal enrollment in elementary school, primary and upper primary, and private schools have played an important role there. And I think both of you have made extremely important points around some of the changes required. I personally feel that we are now at a tipping point, if now, then when. I mean, if half the children are now in private schools and we can't push forward for these changes, then when? So I do believe this is an important moment for us to not just put out a report, but really advocate for making this happen. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Rupa Kudwa. Rupa is our partner, and she, as you know, is the Managing Director of Amitabh Networks India. Over to you, Rupa.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Ashish, and thank you also to the Central Square Foundation and your team for putting this event together. And I must say that it was great to partner with you on this report. I would, in my remarks, like to complement the perspectives that have been shared by you, Ashish, when you kicked this off, Mr. Kant and Mohan. And I would like to bring up a related topic, which is how do we empower parents to demand quality education for their children? Our policy efforts, debates, discussions have so far mainly, and I think rightly, focused a lot on the supply side. But we believe that the time has now come to spur the demand side as well, because this can be an important lever for improving learning outcomes. The dramatic growth that we've seen in India's private school sector in the last 20 years is basically fueled by the aspirations of millions of middle and low-income families who are India's next $500 million, who really believe that private schools will provide their children a higher quality education and become a passport to a better life. Nearly 40% of the children studying in private unaided schools come from the lower middle income segment or below. However, as this report mentions, the learning outcomes in private schools are not materially different from those in government schools. And given the scale of the sector, therefore, as everyone has said, improving learning outcomes in private schools needs to become an essential part of India's human capital development agenda. And as Mohan rightly said, the dramatic shift that we have seen towards private schools represents the conscious exercise of choice by parents. And therefore, the time has come for India to make it easier for the parents to make these choices by providing them the ability to judge the quality of schools and also to strengthen their voice in demanding quality education for their children. Why do parents choose to pay more for private schools than sending their kids to government schools? This is because of three main perceptions. Number one, access to English medium education. Number two, the perception of better teaching and learning. And number three, a set of aspirational factors which are not linked to learning outcomes. For example, presence of computers or school buses or uniforms and things like that. And yet in each of these areas, there's a gap between the perception and the reality, which means that parents are not actually getting what they think they are paying for. Studies have shown very significant numbers in children going to English medium schools, but actually studying in Hindi or the regional language, and schools which have textbooks in English, but we see that teachers are actually translating these textbooks into the regional language while teaching. We've also seen that studies have shown that on an average, government teachers are professionally better qualified and more experienced. However, notwithstanding this, perhaps because of reasons like absenteeism, etc., parents associate better teaching quality with private schools. And again, parents find it really difficult to get a complete and fair picture because board exam results, for example, are not consistently reported across schools. There's also no reliable student learning data at lower grade levels. So there is no doubt that several stakeholders have a role to play in this effort. We've talked about regulators, of course, the parents themselves, but there is also a role that philanthropic capital and impact investors can play here. We as Omidyar Network India are an impact investor funded by philanthropic capital. As an investment firm that's focused on social impact, we make both equity investments in early stage for-profit organizations and we provide grants to nonprofits. And we very firmly believe that philanthropic funding and eventually impact investing capital can play a vital role in supporting parent demand for quality learning. So how do we empower parents to demand quality education? First, obviously greater awareness building. Second, We need increased transparency from the schools themselves. And 3, we need to improve the quality of engagement between the parents and the schools. While governments and regulators can and must make regulations in all these areas, philanthropic funders can play a vital role in laying the foundation for this. They can make the invisible factors of quality much more visible by supporting awareness building campaigns on what quality education means, by enabling creation and deployment of frameworks for greater transparency by schools. For example, just publishing very simple comparisons of school results in consistent formats and standardized ways of dissemination of information on teacher competencies, such as being facilitated by CENTA, one of our portfolio organizations, can make a big difference. Philanthropic funders can also support pilots on very innovative formats of engagement between parents and schools that can serve as a demonstration of what does good really look like. And another area that philanthropic capital can explore is independent third-party assessments of learning interventions. But clearly, unlike the supply side, I would say that on the demand side, we are still very much at the early experimentation stage of trying to build a movement here. And I do hope that today's discussions, and I'm really looking forward to the 2 panels, will strengthen the ideas and opportunities that we've already talked about, like innovations to build awareness, discovery platforms that reduce the information asymmetry that Mr. Kant talked about, and also research and public goods to create evidence of learning, something which both Central Square Foundation and Omidyar Network India are very committed to. And of course, then there is the whole issue of policy reforms, which are focused on student outcomes. Thank you all for coming. It's amazing to see nearly 600 people on this Zoom call. Just shows the tremendous level of interest in this topic, and I'm greatly looking forward to the discussion. With that, back to you, Ashish.
Thank you so much, Rupa, for those remarks. And thank you for pointing out the importance of the demand side. I think as what I am very encouraged by is that, we have 120 million children, 12 crore children who are in private schools. We know that if we can create the right incentives and if parents have the right information in their hands, change can actually happen, because private schools will have the incentive. If the incentives were tweaked and learning outcomes were put front and center, we know they have the ability to deliver. So thank you for making those important remarks. I'd like to now introduce the distinguished panelists we have for our first panel, starting with Sri J. Panda. Sri Panda is the National Vice President and spokesperson for the BJP and is a 4-time member of the Parliament of India. Second, Mr. Gurcharan Das, who is a public intellectual and author. He has written extensively about school education and many other topics in his hard-hitting op-eds, and he's a good friend. Mr. Arun Bharatram, who is the chairman of SRF Limited. Mr. Bharatram also serves as the chairman of Lady Shri Ram College for Women in Delhi and the Shri Ram schools in Delhi NCR. So he has real experience of managing schools. And last but not the least, Ms. Geeta Gandhi Kingdom, who is a professor. She's the chair of Education Economics and International Development at the UCL Institute of Education in University of College London. And she also has very pragmatic experience in managing CMS schools in Lucknow. So thank you all for being here. This is an extremely important juncture. We're in the midst of COVID-19. We have pointed out the importance of the sector, but we hope this can be an impetus for kickstarting reforms in the private sector. The way I'm hoping to run this, because we have limited time, is to do a set of rapid fire questions. And I'll do 2 rounds. So round 1, I'd like to start with Sri Panda. With nearly half the children in private schools, as is pointed out in the report. How can political engagement with the private school sector be more holistic and constructive? Instead of what we often see is it is narrow, populist, and focused on issues like fee regulation.
Thank you, Ashish. And first of all, congratulations for CSF to put up this important conference. I think in addressing this first question, I'd like to point out that the single biggest aspect about private schools is the perception that they are elitist. And therein lies the hurdle in building political consensus on how we should regulate them. And as your report points out, of course, that's not the case. Not only do nearly half the students go to such schools, but nearly 3/4 of these students in private schools are at the lower strata in terms of fees being paid less than 1,000 rupees a month. They are not elitist at all. I've been engaging with this issue for several years. And one of the hurdles that is pointed out is that the RTE has created unrealistic expectations. One of my co-panelists, Geeta Kindon, has written about this extensively, about how it has caused actually barriers to schools that, despite having inferior infrastructure, had been turning out better results in terms of getting students through school. So I think the biggest aspect would be to emphasize this basic fact that this is not about elitism. This is about providing a low cost but effective means of education, and that the government's role ought not to be necessarily only providing education, but providing the platform and the regulatory environment so that education is received universally by every student. And both my other distinguished co-panelists have done enormous work on this, both Mr. Bharatram and Gurcharan Das. And Gurcharan in particular has pointed out something which I think is relevant, is that we need to focus also on improving government schools. And as far as it comes to private schools, to champion more autonomy for them.
Thank you so much for those remarks. I think you make a very important point that the perception is still very much that private schools are elitist. We think of it through the lens of our children or our friends' children. And we need to build this narrative that 1 out of 2 children in India now go to private schools. So it's no longer, these are no longer elite institutions. And so we need to move away. Whose fees are we really regulating? Is that really the role of the state? And I think you brought out all those issues. Thank you. I'd like to now turn to Gurcharan. Gurcharan, you've written extensively on this issue. But what is the #1 reform that needs to be implemented to unlock the private school sector?
I think, Ashish, the #1 reform that I would do is to take away the lie. Today, private education in India is based on a lie. You know, lying is bad. And this lie is that private schools are not supposed to make a profit, when we know that most of them do. They have to survive. And so not only is lying bad for character, bad dharma, but it's also less efficient. It produces bad outcomes. So therefore, it's not on grounds of character, but also on grounds of effectiveness. Now, as you very well pointed out, I must say, a brilliant report with very, very good recommendations. But if half of India's children grow up in a world of chupke chupke, chori chori, what kind of example are we setting for the young? So my one goal would be to drop this hypocrisy, declare education is for profit, and side by side, alongside, remove the license Raj so that more schools, good schools, can open up. Now, why? Why? #1, that this will encourage honest entrepreneurs to come up, educators, idealistic people. I know a number of cases where, in fact, somebody in my family came from abroad to start a school and then ran away because she just couldn't cope with the bribery and corruption and the license raj, that 125 pieces of paper that she had to get approval for. Number two, I think if we do this, outcomes will improve, because by bringing in honest people who are really educators, etc., it will actually discourage today's outcomes are bad, because any halwai can open up a school above his shop and run and on the first floor. The third thing, capital will come in, investment will come in. You will be able to get MSME credit if it's a for-profit segment. And with investment, you'll be able to have technology. And also with a lot of this, then if it's honest profit, then black money will also be curbed. And owners and principals will not be called thieves. They'll get some respect. Parents will be happier because more schools will open up. There'll be greater choice. The supply of goods, of good schools, will improve. And that's heartbreaking sight that we know today of long lines of parents at that particular time of the year trying to get their children in school, and they will not succeed, will also go down. And finally, it will happen. More private schools come up, good schools. They are doing it at 1/3 the cost of government schools. So society will gain because it will get higher quality education at a lower cost to the society. So let's amend the RTE and enshrine the idea of for-profit education.
I'd like to now turn to Mr. Bharatram, who is an industrialist, run a large company, but also been very committed to the education sector and runs one of the most successful set of schools in the NCR region. What do you believe, Mr. Bharatram, should be the focus of monitoring and regulation in the private school sector?
Thank you, Ashish, for giving me this opportunity. If I may just make a mention here that I am not actively involved in my business, so I am much more involved in our NGO, which is catering for education and education in rural areas. So if I may move away a little bit from what you asked me and also be a bit of a contrarian, let me say that unlike other countries, private schools are mushrooming because government schools are poor in quality, and parents don't want to send their children to government schools. Now, we have, from our foundation, started a public-private partnership in 9 states with government schools. And we have now, at the moment, got 280 schools whom we are assisting. And in 10 years, we have seen a marked improvement in the outcomes in these schools. Not only educational outcomes, but sports facilities have been provided, internet has been provided, toilets have been provided. And this has not been done just by my foundation. There are other people who have come forward, seen what we are doing, and have said, okay, we want to partner with you. We will give you the money and you spread this around. So there is a way of actually working with the governments and improving the quality of the government schools. Now, this is not going to take away from the issues that were raised by Rupa and one or two others. I think, Mohan, that whether English will be, which is the most sought after, will be available in these schools. We are trying to teach them better quality English than what otherwise they would have learned. But the most important thing is that they are now finding it a pleasure to go to school. Our schools, we have, as I said, 280 schools. our first experiment was with 40 schools around an hour and a half away from Delhi. All those 40 schools are full, absolutely full. Girls are coming there, and we have actually been able to encourage the society there, the parents there, to ensure that the teachers come to school, that there is no absenteeism of the teachers. So a lot can be done, and I'm just one of the people who's doing this. I'm sure there are many more people who are doing this. So let's not forget the government schools. Let's not forget the government sector. I will maybe in the next round talk a little bit about the private schools also.
No, thank you. I think you're right in pointing out that the government sector, half the children are still there. They often come from poorer families, and so we can't forget about them. And there's a role possibly with people who run private schools even to help contribute, because there's some spillover benefits there. To contribute, whilst running good schools of their own, possibly contribute towards improving government schools as well. I'd like to now turn to Geeta. Geeta is a global expert on education, and in particular has written extensively on the private sector. When I first left the corporate world, I learned a lot by reading Geeta's work and continue to do so. So Geeta, I'd like to turn to you and ask you, what are thoughtful, research-backed ways to increase autonomy for the sector? I think a lot of people earlier, Mr. Kant, Mohan, were talking about increased autonomy for the sector, but while ensuring that there's accountability or quality assurance towards learning. Over to you, Geeta.
Thank you, Ashish. I hope I'm audible.
Absolutely.
So first of all, I'd like to congratulate the Central Square Foundation and the Umeediyar network for an absolutely fantastic report on private schooling. It was so long overdue. It is a travesty that 50% of the population, the child population of the country, studies in these schools, and there is no research that is systematic. I was privileged to also be an advisor to the producers of this report, and there is so much more that needs to be done. But this, for the first year's report, is an absolutely excellent and balanced and fair document. We need lots more data to add to it. So with that, I'd just like to say that, yes, of course, it's very important that when we say that private schools should be given more autonomy, that is counterbalanced with an appropriate commensurate degree of accountability as well. Question is, what are we making the schools accountable for? So at the moment, if you look at the Right to Education Act, we are making schools accountable for inputs, infrastructure, for pupil-teacher ratios. And if you make schools accountable for that, if you put them through those hoops, naturally, schools will focus on the achievement of those outcomes. And so perhaps it's not so surprising that even in private schools, learning levels are quite low. They may be somewhat better than those in government schools, but still very poor learning achievement levels. So despite the acknowledgement by, I think, everybody that learning levels is the key thing to fix, that is not the thing around which accountability pressures revolve at the moment. Despite the fact that everybody knows that learning achievement levels are so poor, whether you look at USSR, you look at PISA, you look at NCERT's own learning achievement surveys showed that, for example, the NAS, the National Achievement Survey for Class 5 from 2011 to 2015, done at 2 points in time, showed that in every single area of competency, learning levels fell over time. It's not just that they remained static, even not just far from increasing, they actually fell. So in such a context, you would have thought that there would be quite a momentum for, increasing learning-based accountability, demanding learning levels to be raised by schools. In the UK, there are 3 key stage exams that children have to take at age 7, at age 11, and at age 14. In several states of the United States of America, the school report cards give 85% weightage to learning levels and only 15% weightage to other factors. So I think that I mean, one encouraging development in all this gloom is the fact that the Niti Aayog, in its recent School Education Quality Index, SEQI index, has really, taken quite a bold step to give 37% weightage to to learning levels in a state. The SEQI index ranks the states of India on the basis of their educational achievements, and for the first time, I think I've seen that weightage has been given, and a very substantial weightage of nearly 40%. 2 out of every 5 points have been given to learning achievement levels. So that's very encouraging. It's a strong statement of intent, and I hope it foretells the direction of travel. However, we're also going to be guided very much by the new education policy that's imminent. There we have much less of a data-driven or assessment-driven approach. I think that there's an inadequate focus there on assessments-based accountability. In fact, the new education policy has a focus on making private schools accountable kind of bottom up, through citizen accountability or social accountability through the medium of a school management committee. Whereas the Right to Education Act had kept the private schools out of the ambit of such a school management committee structure, the new education policy has actually asked that private schools be run through a school management committee, which will, of course, be quite a challenge to the autonomy of these schools. But the experience in India with school management committees has not been good. We know that previously there were village education committees. They were not effective. The school management committees, since the Right to Education Act came, have not been, they've presided over a declining learning achievement levels, and not, sort of an exodus from the government schools in terms of falling enrollments. So I think the school management committees have not been successful in being able to provide a strong accountability structure. So I think to put faith in those would be wrong in the new education policy. So, question is, what does one do? And there are certain things that other countries are doing, which we can perhaps think about. One I mentioned, assessments, regular assessments at certain key stages. As I said, in the UK, at the age of 7, at the age of 11, and at the age of 14. And of course, the last key stage, of course, is the age 16, the school leaving exam. It's the end of compulsory schooling in the UK. Again, school report cards are another way. But the really important thing is that how these assessments should be done. At the moment, assessments are done by government or government agencies. And there's a recent paper by Dr. Abhijit Singh. He's an education economist at the Stockholm School of Economics in Sweden. And he is part of the RISE program, the Research into Systems of Education program, of which I'm privileged also to be a member of the International Delivery Board of that research program. His research shows that the level of student achievement in Madhya Pradesh, he did this study on Madhya Pradesh. It's a randomized controlled trial experiment in which he gave, so after the state of Madhya Pradesh had done its, they cover 7 million students annually in testing children. After they had done that, he followed up a month later and did testing of in 2,400 schools. In half the schools, he gave the assessments in paper and pen tests, and in half he gave them tablet-based tests. And he found that there were severely inflated reporting due to cheating when the government had done its assessments. Of the order of 40 percentage points. So a child who got actually 25 percentage point in Abhijit's test in 4 weeks later, the same child in Abhijit's test had got 25%. In the government test 4 weeks earlier, he had been given 65%. So a 40 percentage point difference. So even when the stakes are very low, there were no high stakes. Nobody's jobs depended on showing that these children have got good marks. There was a tendency to give good news. So I think that these are some of the challenges that will come when you move to assessments-based accountability, which has to be one strand. And I think the last point I would say is that I think parents can also be empowered to hold schools accountable. If you give parents information, at the moment, there's a total lack of information with parents about how their schools are doing. There are no school league tables. There's no publication of data of how children are performing in the different tests, or not even in the board exams in the class 10th. Nobody compiling this data. I think sharing this sort of data will really help to empower parents to hold schools accountable.
No, thank you, Geeta. I think those are some very relevant points that, we need. It's not easy. We don't have the right indicators. I mean, even accreditation is not easy when you have such a large ecosystem, over 4 lakh private schools. We already struggle, NAC struggles with a much smaller universe of higher ed institutions. One of the things I think we have seen is that if we can get a learning marker, like you pointed out, the key stage exam, because
Ashish, we can't hear you.
You've frozen, Ashish.
Yeah. The government
Ashish, you're really breaking up.
to actually show this. So, but I agree with you. I think one has to think. I'm sorry, is this better?
Yes.
This is
Yeah,
better.
I'm sorry about that. So I was saying that, thank you, Geeta, for those points. I'll just turn it over. We have limited time, so I'll do another rapid fire. But if you could just give me a 1 to 2 line response. I'll start again with Sri Panda. Sir, given that you're in government, what advice would you give to people in the ecosystem? You mentioned that this is perceived to be an elite set of schools, the private schools. But what advice? I mean, I think these recommendations have been talked about in the past. We've tried to put it together, backed by data and in a more cogent framework. What advice would you give to this set of actors and to the ecosystem in terms of taking this forward with government so that we actually have a more pragmatic approach towards regulating private schools, at the same time holding them accountable and create the incentives for improving learning outcomes? Hello?
Yes, I think I got that your voice was breaking up a little bit. So let me just say this. I think the advice I would give is to highlight the success stories. Often highlight the great personalities who studied from very impoverished backgrounds. I think we need to highlight, I think the 50% of students that are coming from private schools, most of which are not elite, must be yielding and so on and so forth. And Ashish, I'm afraid I'm out of time. I would request to be excused. I need to leave now.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you.
Really appreciate your time. I'll turn it over to Geeta. Geeta, if you could just give us one line, thank you, sir, on what advice you would give to policymakers.
Okay. I think that, the best advice comes out of, I think, when you're when you're really gobsmacked by something very strongly. And the recent statistic that I came up with when I was analyzing the data on looking at the value for money, average enrollment in the school as a whole of 45 children. And the per pupil teacher salary expenditure in these 70% of government elementary schools nearly is 39,000 rupees per child per annum. And that, to benchmark it, is equivalent to 34% of the per capita income of India and 102% of the per capita income of Bihar. So this is the amount of expenditure on government of education is high, and it is not giving good value for money. So I think that the same amount of resources could be used much more productively to yield a much higher level of output if it was done through public-private partnership. The Right to Education Act already sets up a kind of a public-private partnership by obliging private schools to give at least 25% of their seats to children from deprived backgrounds. And instead of giving money to them, the reimbursement money that government gives to them directly, give it direct as a DBT, as a direct benefit transfer to the children, to the parents, and that will make them like fee-paying parents. They will have the dignity of walking into a school of their choice, and they would be empowered to hold that school accountable, instead of the current situation that they go there, feeling a little sheepish and not feeling welcomed, because it seems like they are the product of government handout, and also they're not able to hold those schools accountable. I think that this would be a good test case for later on, perhaps when we see how successfully this kind of public-private partnership can work. It could be then scaled up to funding all government schools through a DBT, which would force the schools to be more accountable to those fee-paying parents. I think this would be a really major reform. I know that there are political feasibility hurdles here, and a lot of political spine would be needed, but it would be the right thing to do.
Thank you, Geeta. Mr. Bharatram, what would be your one-line message to policymakers with regards to private schools?
Well, one of the issues, Ashish, is that in these private schools, the ones we are talking about, which charge 500 rupees, 1,000 rupees per month fees, the quality of teachers is so abysmal. And part of the reason is that our higher education system itself, the B.Ed degree that is doled out, given out, is so poor in quality, and then they come and teach in these schools. Half the time they are not there, and that's a part of the accountability issue. But I think teacher training is something which is absolutely important. And this applies to private schools, and this more so applies to even government schools. I have seen the quality of teachers both in government schools and in these small private schools, which is so bad that there is the chance of their being able to provide a good education gets very, very limited. So I think there has to be some focus on what is the quality of teachers that we are having, and what are we producing from our universities. So this is a big issue which we will need to tackle also. And the number of teachers that we will need in the future is going to be so humongous. Where are we going to get the teachers from?
Sure. And Gurcharan, if I could just ask you, what is your message to policymakers? You could just summarize, your takeaways with regards to, private schools and how we can bring about this change, in the next 2 or 3 years.
Well, I think the word is autonomy. While we want to have a vibrant government school sector, nobody is saying that you shouldn't be improving it. But we've been trying to improve it for 70 years. And now parents have voted with their feet. What you want now is at least make the private school sector a legitimate activity. And legitimate activity means don't shackle it with the license Raj and 125 approvals and bribery and corruption. Secondly, I think you should have the kind of regulatory framework that exists for private schools overseas. And overseas, they don't control the salaries, they don't control the fees, and they give them autonomy. And thirdly, we've talked about this whole business of assessment. That's extremely important. And fourth, I think there's a conflict of interest today in the government, because the same people who are running schools are also regulating private schools. You need to separate that completely, almost into two ministries. If you can't do it in two ministries, at least have absolutely two different departments. This conflict of interest really creates the problem of trust, the lack of trust that exists between the two. Now we have to see that India, the regulator, ultimately has to see both. He has to see that the children get educated and let the parents decide how the children want to get educated. And therefore, I would say split the government regulation into two and have a separate person, a regulator for private schools and a separate one for running the schools.
No, thank you, Gurcharan. And I think as we all know, in many other sectors, telecom, aviation, utilities, we've moved to a principle where the department really is responsible for policy. And then there are...
Yes, please go ahead with the panel discussion.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. Hello. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for this excellent report. Firstly, a word of thanks on behalf of the public, on behalf of the media, myself, in the education world. Thank you very much for this excellent report, long overdue. I've learned a lot from the cursory reading of the report, which I only received this afternoon. And it's like, I'm very glad that you emphasized what we've been saying in education world for a long time, that half the children in this country go to private schools, and they're not elitist institutions which need to be always condemned and excoriated, as is in the public debate, as is happening around the country. And certainly I've learned a lot, like 70%, I didn't know the figures, 70% of children pay less than 1,000 rupees per month as fees in private schools, and 45% pay less than 500. But all is not well in private schools, as the report also points out. 35% of children in class 5 in rural private schools can't read and comprehend texts of class 2. That shows that there's a lot to be done also in improving private schools in this country. And the excellent suggestions for 5 pillars of reform: universal learning indicator is required, accreditation for a framework. As you know, in education, some of you may know, in education world, we do the annual Education World India rankings, which is now the world's largest school ranking survey. And we have, we assess schools on 14 parameters, including academic reputation. And we are, for your information, working on independent accreditation framework for schools, and with some very well-known educators from abroad. And the other important thing is you need an independent regulator, as pointed out by all the speakers earlier. And we need to allow for-profit schools. Yes, absolutely. And strengthen RTE Section 12. So with those preliminary remarks, let me introduce my panel. First, we have Mr. Prabhat Jain, who is the former chairman, who is the founder chairman of FICCI Arise, that is Alliance for Reimagining School Education, and who is also the promoter, director of the Pathway Schools, which are quite highly ranked in the education world rankings, annual rankings. Then we have Mr. Kulbhushan Sharma, president of NISA, which is the National Alliance for National Independent Schools Alliance, which has a membership of 50,000 or 60,000 private budget schools, which are low affordable schools. And he also runs 2 schools. So he is a very articulate spokesman, although he'll be speaking in Hindi, I presume. And he is a very articulate spokesperson of private budget schools and also a champion of private education. So I'm very pleased to see him here. Then we have Mr. Vikas Junjunwala, is a very experienced, I believe, an IT professional, and not the professional working in US, Germany, and Turkey, who's decided to switch tracks and has come and started 2 Sunshine schools, 2 schools under the name Sunshine, under the brand Sunshine in the Delhi NCR region. And last but not least, we have Ms. Bhuvna Anand, who's the director of the Center for Civil Society, one of India's top think tanks, and very active in the education space. So welcome all of you, and perhaps we can get started on the, I don't see anybody on the screen. So perhaps, Prabhat, we can start with you.
Sure, Dilip.
Yeah, can you, one second.
I'm on the screen.
Are you on the screen? Okay.
Yeah.
So, you know, you set up two very high-end schools and well-ranked, well-respected. And what were the, I mean, how difficult, as we saw earlier, that you have to do documentation of 170 documents to set up a school? And really, how difficult is it to start new schools in India today? And has it improved since has the regulatory system, improved since you initiated your schools?
Yeah, thanks, Dilip, and good evening, everybody. It's great to be part of this discussion forum, and it was very enlightening to go through the addresses of some very high luminaries and dignitaries in the last panel, and also, of course, the opening remark and the launch of this outstanding report. So, Dilip, coming to your question, we run 3 K-12 campuses and 2 play schools, and that's something which all started as a dream in the year 2000, 2001. But I tell you, little did we realize at that point of time that this sector is what it is, and what we discovered when we entered into this sector, and we continue to discover what this sector is every day, even till today. Things have not changed in the last 17 years. They have only gotten worse than what they were earlier.
Oh, really?
For certain reasons, for certain reasons that I'll tell you. In terms of what problems we face by way of entering at the time of entering the sector, I think many of us. Okay, so first of all, let's understand who are the kind of people who want to enter the school education sector. There are clearly 2 kinds of people who want to enter the school education sector. One is a set of people who are pure business people and who want to cash on an opportunity of a gap in quality or a perceived quality, and there is a money to be made there. And there is a second set of entrants who are, and I'm talking about the entrants who are not philanthropic entrants. There is charity, there is philanthropy, and which has its place, which has its need. There's government which has its need, that all stays there. I'm talking about private entrants here who are not coming with philanthropy. So one is the entrants who come with a pure business objective. Second is the people who come in this sector as passion, and they enter this sector knowing very well that this is even if this is a business, we consider this as a business, but this is a public spirited business. Healthcare is a public spirited business. Distribution of electricity is a public spirited business. Banking, insurance are public spirited businesses. That's why we have regulators, so that large public which gets affected by these businesses, their interests, continue to remain protected. So there are clearly 2 kinds of entrants. For the former kind of entrant, there is absolutely no entry barrier. In fact, this is the best place for them to enter, because we know businesses thrive in our traditional mode in license Raj. And this is a sector which has outstanding license Raj, which continues till today. So the guys who know how to work their way around, they have a great, open playing field.
You mean they know how to grease the wheels of the system, right?
Well, that's been the frugal entrepreneurship of this country, as we know, Somehow
Yes.
the system perpetuated that, and a lot of people have that inside them. So we have clearly that kind of set of people. For them, there is no entry barrier. Let's not have any 2 bones about it. But when it comes to the letter, for people like, and I take pride in calling myself as part of the same fraternity as Mr. Jhunjhunwala, as Mr. Kulbhushan Sharma, and several of us, Geeta, several people who are in this field, who enter this field with passion as a public spirited, and to create a public spirited enterprise where you have to first create value. It's value because you're dealing with 1,200 students or 2,500 students, but each and every of that student is the whole world for his or her set of parents, right? So it's a huge thing of responsibility, and you're shaping future generations. For people like these, the barriers to entry, I don't think there is any entry opportunity at all. It's only the mavericks who just push themselves into it, without even realizing what they will get into and continue to deal with it on a daily basis. In today's world, we are not in those ancient times where you could, you could manage with whatever. You have very sophisticated, high quality teachers who enjoyed the best respect in the society. Rajguru's seat was always next to the king in a court in our traditional times, right?
Yes.
But we don't know if we have continued that in today's times at all. So those times are gone. And we have to be real with what exists today. To set up a good school infrastructure with no frills. Once Mr. Mohandas Pai and I were doing a little calculation. He said, Prabhat, let's just do an estimate that, if we set up a school which is absolutely a no-frill school, only deals with academics, and a school for 1,000 students, how much do you think would it cost as operational money? So it was a back of an envelope calculation that on a overall school student teacher ratio of 1:20, which means in a class you have about 35 students, you need at least 50 teachers, right? And the entry level salary as per 7th pay commission today for a primary teacher is about 45,000 rupees. That's the entry level, no experience teacher. On an average for good teachers, if you say 80,000, 90,000, 100,000, and 20,000 on an average salary, your 5 crores gone, 4.5 crores gone in salaries on an annual basis. Then you have your support staff, then you have your electricity, then you have your utilities.
Now, 1 second, Prabhat. I've understood that it's very difficult yes, nothing has changed, as you said. Now, after you started the school, how difficult it is to run it?
So one is access to capital is not there, because the way we have to structure ourselves, we don't get capital. And in today's times, you cannot set up a school. And after COVID, the technology requirement is so much that, several schools struggle to do that. After we start, the problems that we face are again on a daily basis. You have a full government system which has a conflict of interest, which runs its own schools and which also regulates the private schools. Now, what is happening in reality, that the same people, they are mostly devoted in fixing or in monitoring private schools, because that's where the incentive for them lies. That also leaves behind the government schools, because you only have as many hours to work in a day.
You sound very pessimistic that nothing's changed really.
It hasn't. Correct? Things have changed, but things have changed in bits and pieces. School education continues to be a state subject, right? We have had a huge problem or a distrust which had been happening in the country between parents and schools on account of fees and fee regulation, right? We have seen what has happened in Tamil Nadu, in Gujarat, in Rajasthan, in Maharashtra. And come 2018, come Uttar Pradesh, the Fee Regulation Act, what Uttar Pradesh came out with in 2018, is a landmark legislation. So what it also says, that there are simple solutions to what we perceive as complex problems. The reason why they are not happening is because there are huge cartels sitting both in private sector, the one I defined, and in public sector who have their own interests. And there is a hypocrisy sitting on top that doesn't let it happen.
Okay, let me interrupt you. Let's move on to some of the other people. We'll come back to you. Kulbhushan ji.
Ji, sir.
As you know, budget private schools, and you've been on various platforms saying that it's very difficult. In fact, in the COVID era, it's become very difficult to run budget private schools, because on one hand, you're told, your parents are told, you are told, don't collect fees, continue paying your teachers, and also do online education. So now, how can you tell us? How difficult, do you agree with Mr. Prabhat Jain, who was saying that it's become more difficult now to run private schools than before?
सबसे पहले तो मैं थैंक्स करूंगा आशीष धवन जी का और सेंटर स्क्वायर फाउंडेशन का, जो उन्होंने एक बहुत अच्छी रिपोर्ट दी कि 70% स्कूल्स जो हैं 1000 से कम पे एजुकेशन कैटर कर रहे हैं। और जो आपने दलीप जी अभी बात कही, मैं हिंदी में ही अपने जवाब दूंगा क्योंकि मैं बेटर दे पाऊंगा। तो आपने नीसा ने एक अपने लेवल पे एक सर्वे कराया, एक गूगल शीट बनाकर, कि फी की क्या कंडीशन है जो आपने कहा। तो फी की कंडीशन आपको बताऊंगा कि ये निकल के आई कि हमने अबाउट 3800 के करीब स्कूल्स का जो है सर्वे किया नीसा के गूगल शीट पे। तो निकल के आया कि 58.2% स्कूल्स तो सिंगल पेनी नहीं आई, 0% फीस पर जो है इस समय बजट प्राइवेट स्कूल खड़े हैं। और 15.3% स्कूल्स में 0 से 1% फीस आई, 9.9% स्कूल्स में 2.3% फीस आई, और 0.9% स्कूल में 4 to 5% फीस आई। और जो मोर देन 10% फीस जिन स्कूल्स को आई वो 3.9% स्कूल है। जो डाटा पहले भी निकल के आया, जैसे अभी पीछे पैनलिस्ट ने भी कहा कि एलीट स्कूल्स को, जय पांडा जी ने भी कहा, एलीट स्कूल्स को देखकर जो है पॉलिसीज बनती है, तो उन्हीं को वो स्कूल्स मानते हैं। तो 3.9% स्कूल्स जो है वो डाटा बिल्कुल सच कह रहा है कि उनको 10% से ऊपर फीस आई। और जो ऑनलाइन एजुकेशन का भी हमने डाटा अपने नीसा के उस पर किया, तो 73.1% स्कूल ऑनलाइन एजुकेशन दे रहे हैं, जो अभी भी ऑनलाइन एजुकेशन प्रोवाइड कर रहे हैं, बाकी नहीं दे पा रहे जो उनकी कंडीशंस है। तो ये इसके पीछे जो सबसे बड़ा कारण, शुरू से हम पूरी डिस्कशन सुन रहा था कि क्या कारण है कि इंडियन एजुकेशन पॉलिसी, और प्रभात जी ने अभी जो बात कही कि पहले राजगुरु हुआ करते थे और जो राष्ट्रगुरु, मैं राष्ट्रगुरु कहूंगा, राजगुरु तो, और राजा के साथ उसको जो है स्थान मिला करता था। आज सिनेरियो चेंज है, लेकिन उस समय प्रभात जी और दलीप जी, मैं आपको बताऊं कि उस समय महल से भी बच्चा कुटिया में जाया करता था। ये एक सिस्टम था कि महल से भी बच्चा कुटिया में जाता था। लेकिन आज, और उस समय राजा को जो चुनने का अधिकार पब्लिक को नहीं था, राजा को परिवार से ही गद्दी मिला करती थी, वो राजा बन जाता था। आज डेमोक्रेसी है, डेमोक्रेसी में राजा, आपके पास चॉइस है आपको किसको राजा बनाना है, जैसे आपने मोदी जी को राजा बनाया। लेकिन ये एक बहुत बड़ी चीज है कि एजुकेशन में अभी चॉइस नहीं है।
और कुलभूषण जी, आपको मालूम है इंडिया में 4 लाख बजट स्कूल, बजट प्राइवेट स्कूल है। आपका अंदाज क्या है उसमें से कितना, हाउ मेनी विल हैव टू क्लोज डाउन?
इनमें मैक्सिमम वो स्कूल क्लोज हो चुके हैं जो रेंट पर स्कूल थे बहुत सारे, क्योंकि गवर्नमेंट के ऐसे रूल्स हैं कि आपको लीज डीड चाहिए। तो वो जो रेंट पे स्कूल चल रहे थे वो ऑलमोस्ट क्लोज हो चुके हैं, क्योंकि उनको टीचर सैलरी एक अलग बर्डन था, रेंट एक बहुत बड़ा बर्डन था, तो उन्होंने स्कूल खाली कर दिए हैं, वो स्कूल क्लोज हो गए हैं। और हमारी जो इंफॉर्मेशन में 4 से 5 लोग सुसाइड भी कर चुके हैं, ऐसी स्कूल ऑनर्स सुसाइड भी कर चुके हैं। स्कूल बिल्डिंग है उनकी क्लोज नहीं, स्कूल ऑनर ही क्लोज हो गया कि वो ईश्वर के पास चले गए हैं, कि उन्होंने ये दुनिया ही छोड़ दी है। और उसके बाद बहुत सारे टीचर्स का भी आपने टाइम्स ऑफ इंडिया में भी देखा होगा, जो नीसा ने भी बहुत डाटा दिया, कोई बनाना बेच रहे हैं, कोई इडली लगा रहे हैं, कोई जो है घर के जिम के अंदर सफाई कर रहा है। तो टीचर्स की भी, बजट प्राइवेट स्कूल्स के टीचर्स की भी कंडीशन बहुत क्रिटिकल हो चुकी है। स्कूल ऑनर्स जो आने वाला जो सितंबर के पास, ये हमें ऐसा आभास लग रहा है कि बहुत सारे स्कूल्स ऑनर्स डिप्रेशन में जा सकते हैं और सुसाइड भी कर सकते हैं, क्योंकि जो जो ये टाइम बढ़ रहा है, फीस आ नहीं रही है, टीचर्स का प्रेशर भी है, बैंक की लोन्स का प्रेशर भी है। अभी तक बैंक ने किस्तें जो है डेफर की हुई है, लेकिन अगस्त सितंबर के बाद वो प्रेशर भी आएगा, तो उसको शायद स्कूल ऑनर्स, बजट प्राइवेट स्कूल ऑनर्स बिल्कुल भी जो है टैकल ना कर पाए। तो स्कूल तो जस्ट जिनकी फीस नहीं आई है तो उसको आप क्लोज ही मानेंगे कि जब 58% स्कूल्स की, 58.2% स्कूल की अगर खाता ही नहीं खुला है, बिगनिंग ही नहीं हुई है, इट मींस दे आर क्लोज। 58% स्कूल क्लोज हो चुके हैं अगर टेक्निकली माना जाए तो।
दिलीप, यू आर म्यूट।
दिलीप जी, आपकी आवाज नहीं आ रही है।
Dilip, can you hear us?
Dilip, you are still mute.
You have muted me. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Yes.
Actually, you had muted me. Okay. आपने question का जवाब नहीं दिया, sir. What is your estimate that out of your total 400,000 budget schools, if this situation continues, schools are shut, say, till end September, how many will have to close down?
दिलीप जी, मैंने कहा कि 58% स्कूल का खाता नहीं खुला है, फीस 0% पे खड़ी है. इट मींस टेक्निकली ये स्कूल क्लोज्ड हो चुके हैं. कि अगर कहीं से इनको 58%, जो नीसा ने 4,000 के करीब स्कूल का डाटा कलेक्ट किया, उसमें 58% स्कूल्स को 0% फीस आई है, और जो दूसरों को भी आई है वो 1% या 4 से 5% फीस जो है, ये सिर्फ 10% स्कूल को 3.9%, 10% फीस जो आई है 3.9% स्कूल को.
What is your
कगार पे पहुंच गए हैं.
What is your solution in one line?
देखिए, इस पे सबसे बड़ा सोल्यूशन जो हमेशा हम कह रहे थे कि एजुकेशन पॉलिसी हमेशा गवर्नमेंट फंडेड होनी चाहिए. अगर पेंडेमिक के दौरान भी जो है गवर्नमेंट इसको इक्वालिटी में लेकर, और जो इनके 20 लाख करोड़ के पैकेज की बात कही है, उस समय जो है डीबीटी फॉर द टाइम बीइंग करे. डीबीटी करके स्कूल्स को नहीं, फंड द पेरेंट्स को अगर फंड करे तो ये स्कूल सरवाइव हो सकते हैं. और ये सिर्फ इस समय का मैटर नहीं है, ये 5 लाख स्कूल्स का मैटर है. इसको एक बहुत ब्रॉडर पर्सपेक्टिव में देखना चाहिए कि अगर स्कूल्स को सिर्फ आज ही नहीं, कैसे लॉन्ग रन सरवाइव करें. तो एक तो गवर्नमेंट फंडेड एजुकेशन पॉलिसी होनी चाहिए. दूसरा, इसको हमारा बिल्कुल स्पष्ट मानना है कि इसको फॉर प्रॉफिट भी डिक्लेयर करना चाहिए.
Which is one of the recommendations of the CSF report.
This is the recommendation of the all schools. Because हमें जब ट्रांसपेरेंट होने की बात कही जाती है, तो जब हमें खुद ही चोर बना दिया गया, ऐसे एजुकेशन पॉलिसी है कि जैसे दिल्ली में ये है, सेक्शन 10(1) ये कहता है कि चाहे आपकी कलेक्ट फीस 5,000 हो रही है, आपको टीचर को 25,000 देना है. फिर हम ट्रांसपेरेंट कैसे हो सकते हैं कि हमारे पास आया 5,000, तो 25,000 को जब हम फेक तरीके से दिखाएंगे, अगर हम ट्रांसपेरेंसी देने की कोशिश करेंगे तो वी विल बी इन द जेल. तो हम जो है उसमें फंसेंगे. तो इसलिए इस पॉलिसी को तुरंत ट्रांसपेरेंट तब हो सकते हैं जब इसको फॉर प्रॉफिट किया जाए और गवर्नमेंट फंडेड किया जाए और डीबीटी इस पे लागू की जाए. यही इसके लॉन्ग टर्म सॉल्यूशंस है. और इसी से ही राइट टू क्वालिटी नहीं, राइट टू क्वालिटी एजुकेशन बच्चों को मिलेगी.
Yes, sir. The CSF report and education world is on your side. We support you, sir. We can look forward to better time. Let's move on to Mr. Junjunwala. Sir, you have been, as the note says, you have been living the American dream in the US, and you worked in Turkey, Germany, in Europe. You've seen, obviously you've been of industrial experience. Now you've come and set up 2 schools here. What's the experience been like? Is it like totally disheartening from what we've been hearing thus far? Or is there like, are you optimistic about the way ahead? Now that there's so much interest in education and private education in particular.
Sure, thanks a lot, Dilip. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, yeah.
Okay, great. So first of all, when Ruchika asked me to be on this panel along with Kulbhushan ji and with Prabhas Jain ji, so it's a big honor for me, obviously. Sunshine School was founded about 5 years ago. So we're a very recent entrant into the private school education industry. And basically the vision was to set up a chain of budget private schools that provide a high quality education at an affordable fee point, but in a sustainable manner. So basically, fee revenue based rather than donation based. And so our experience in the last 5 years, we basically came in with a couple of hypotheses. The first hypothesis was that there's a huge amount of demand for quality education. And I think the report itself talks about that very clearly. And that has been our experience as well. And number 2, the hypothesis was that the current set of competitors, which are there in the market, are relatively poor and relatively weak. And that if we can come in with new energy, new ideas, new technologies, new innovative pedagogy, then we should be able to dominate the market, and we should be able to not just be sustainable, but be profitable. And Mr. Prabhat Jain has been very, very clear And that has been our experience as well. Obviously, we're at two different ends of the spectrum. Pathways versus Sunshine Schools, our fee structure is between 500 and 1,000 rupees per month. But essentially, the opportunity, what we see is tremendous. It's been tremendous. It's getting better. And for somebody like us who comes in with a very professional mindset, it's relatively easy for us to go into any micro market. We have two schools right now, one in Delhi and the other one in Ghaziabad. In both markets, we've had the same experience that within a couple of years, because of the fact that we are able to bring in better pedagogy, we are able to bring in better technologies, better management skill, it's very easy to be able to actually dominate the market and to become the the best player in the market. And it's very easy to become profitable. In fact, I would say the current regulations are.
Is it very easy? Is it very easy to break even?
It's extremely easy to break even. We break even at about 200 students, even though we charge about 500 to 1,000 rupees per month. And we're running on a rental model. We don't even own the land. So it's actually very easy to break even. And so actually the regulations, as Prabhat said, are funny because basically it's like getting a government job. Getting a government job is really difficult, but once you get the government job, you're secure for life. Financially, you have, this is a great business in terms of you have a customer who comes in, he's with you for 7 years, for 10 years, for 12 years, depending upon what the level of the school is. And it's basically, he prepays you. So you have basically very limited customer acquisition costs after a little bit of time, because you basically, the competitor, it's very difficult. Just like it's difficult for you to come into the sector, it's really difficult for other people to come in. So once you're in, then you're actually golden. So actually the current set of regulations works really well. Sorry, Dilip, you're asking something.
Does it mean that regulatory system after you've started is relatively benign?
See, it's not benign, but essentially so the business opportunity is so tremendous that you're willing to deal with all the regulatory craziness, right? I mean, it's still absolutely crazy, like Kulbhushan ji is talking about. You have to hide everything. You are a chore. You basically can't make a profit legally on paper. You have to pay your teachers, government teacher salaries, despite the fact that at 500 rupees per child with 30 kids in a classroom, I'm getting 15,000 rupees per month, and I'm supposed to show 40,000 rupees as teacher salaries. So it's absolutely insane. But because the business opportunity is so good and there's so limited competition that you kind of, once you're in, then you just kind of deal with it, which is not good for the sector as a whole. It's not good for the country. It's not good for the children of this country, but it's actually very good for the people who are running their schools, who are already
No. On the contrary, it's good for the children. It's good for the children. You're being too modest. Okay. Thank you. That's an optimistic note there. Bhuvna, if I might come to you now, you know, CCS, at least in education world, has a legendary reputation. You've done a lot of work, a lot of research, and I'm told now by CSF that you've conducted a lot of in-depth research in starting several private schools in Haryana and Delhi recently. What are the most crucial findings? Like how easy has it been, and how satisfied are you with the progress of these schools?
It's incredible. We, over the last 20 years have taken multiple research studies on the same story, right? Exactly the question you asked. How much have things changed? How easy was it then? Is it easier now? Have we gotten wiser with time? Unfortunately, the findings that we have from multiple research, about 3 of these, are not that, sort of hope-inducing. Small examples, right? Opening and operating a school is really, really hard, particularly a private unaided school. So take, for example, some of this has been reported in the CSF report as well. Everything from 3 licenses to 190 to 200 documents. And again, each document it's not as if these 190 documents have to be submitted once. It's for each of these requirements, some have to be submitted twice, some have to be submitted thrice, so on and so forth, right? And this process can take up to 5 years in some of the government data that we have seen. We've examined actual files and seen, people who are in queue at the moment, how long have they been in queue? Some have been in queue for 5 years for recognition.
No. If I might interrupt for a minute, what's the purpose of this filling up so many documents? Is it that they just want to extract speed money out of you, or
it's not 100% clear, right? So it's interesting. We also looked at how does a file move. So we tracked each individual file that is in pipeline at the moment, just to record what happened, just chasing looking at the law, looking at the actual file and saying, how did it move, right? So each file goes through 40 different officers. And here is the interesting thing. There's this one person that we've not been able to figure out de jure who this person is, but he's called a dealing assistant, right? And a file moves through this dealing assistant multiple times. Who this is, how this works, what is their mandate, what is the way to tie their hand, none of this is clear, right? So this is one type of example. One of the requirements is, for 20 years ago, we wrote this, one of my dear friends wrote this paper at CCS. It's called the essentiality certificate, right? Multiple states have this requirement. Nobody has been able to explain to me till date what an unessential school is, right? It boggles the mind that this should still persist. We counted different states. So we put together a framing, and I'm happy to share with everyone. These are public goods. We've counted 144 individual state acts, right? So each state has an average of about between 4 and 8 different acts. In addition, there are rules. In addition, there are 2,000 page something called a school code for a primary section as well as a secondary section. From what I understand, that's like a textbook for a school principal, and every school principal, you'll find it on their desk or their bookshelf, right? That contains notifications, orders, circulars, so on and so forth. It's simple things. We looked at the language of the law in 4 different states. We studied about 5,000 pages of legislation. So everything from a law to regulation to notification, circulars, so on. And it's fascinating that you would find the language be so starkly different between what is applied to a private school and what is applied to a government school. In the case of private schools, the kind of the language used is government may debar, may take over, may withdraw. Schools must conform. They shall cease to function, right? This is the kind of threatening language that is for private schools. Contrast this with the language used for government schools. Government shall monitor, shall develop, shall maintain, shall aim to or strive to. This is the kind of, when we say conflict of interest or there is a problem, you have to look at the law to understand how this emerges, right? Small other examples. In the case of school inspection.
It's quite evident that the whole purpose of this is to actually make it as difficult for a promoter to start a school and to harass you so that then you comply with whatever requests they have. Is that correct?
Absolutely. But in addition to it, I also think that there is this sort of aversion, right, to a private school. And even if you didn't mean to just rent seek, you just hate the idea of private schools so much that you're willing to ignore all kinds of evidence about parents voting with their feet, about parents, wholeheartedly escaping the government school system in one way, right?
So after you set up these schools, do you agree with what Vikas was saying, that once you set it up, it's relatively, you're getting good learning outcomes from these schools, which are difficult to set up?
So it really
harassment continues.
My sense is that it's not so much about harassment that continues, but as with every single, and we know this from the ease of doing business approach, right? That it's not just about law and entering. Then starts the cycle of filings, registers to be maintained, returns that you have to put in, inspections that you have to go through. So irrespective of whether it is corruption engendering, the cost of compliance is really high. The amount of time you have to spend, the amount of energy you have to spend, the amount of money you have to spend in being fully 100% compliant.
It's a huge disincentive, in fact.
Exactly. For that, there is this problem of adverse selection, meaning that either those who can cope and get around the center, or of course you have to have a significant financial.
Sorry, I have to cut you short there because I'm told that 30 minutes are up. So now I'm going to ask all of you to give a one-line reply to the question that, in your view, what is the one recommendation that you would make to help private schools to thrive and support the learning goals of the country? Start with you, Bhuvna.
You'll start with me?
Yes.
Yes, sure. I'm going to cheat a little. I know you said one sentence, so I will say one sentence, but I think the bracket is sort of removing barriers to commercial investments in education. And this includes everything from applying the ease of doing business framing, empowering parents with learning quality data, and lastly, this for-profit requirement and essentiality requirement, getting rid of, getting rid of these. So these are things that I think will have a game-changing effect.
Well summed up. Kulbhushan ji, your one recommendation, how to improve private schools.
सबसे पहले तो ईज ऑफ ओपनिंग स्कूल होना चाहिए, और जो रिकॉग्निशन के लिए जो इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर के नॉर्म है उसकी जगह लर्निंग आउटकम बेस्ड रिकॉग्निशन को ज्यादा प्रेफरेंस देना चाहिए। स्कूल्स को फॉर प्रॉफिट डिक्लेयर किया जाए और पब्लिक को चॉइस दी जाए कि वो अपने मनपसंद का स्कूल, देश का लास्ट बच्चा, अंतिम बच्चा खुद चुन सके। उसके लिए पब्लिक गवर्नमेंट फंडेड एजुकेशन पॉलिसी होनी चाहिए, यानी हर बच्चे को उसके शिक्षा का हक थ्रू डीबीटी डायरेक्ट मिलना चाहिए, जिससे ये करप्शन खत्म होगी, तभी ट्रांसपेरेंसी हो पाएगी। क्योंकि आज लैक्स में मुझे पंजाब में पता लगा कि एनओसी का 25 लाख रुपया करप्शन है। जब वो 25 लाख करप्शन करेगा और बहुत सारे स्टेट में 50 लाख की करप्शन है, तो वो ट्रांसपेरेंट कैसे हो पाएगा? तो ईज ऑफ ओपनिंग स्कूल और ये सारी अगर पॉलिसीज फॉर प्रॉफिट, डीबीटी और ये चीजें कर दी जाए तो बहुत
थैंक यू सर। योर वन सेंटेंस।
राइट टू क्वालिटी एजुकेशन बच्चे को मिलेगा। राइट टू क्वालिटी एजुकेशन।
We are with you there. Vikas?
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So basically, I will agree with Gujar Das ji that if today Sachin and Binny Binsal of Flipkart, if they wanted to, if before starting Flipkart, they had decided to look at the segment, the private school education segment, they would have been rejected by every investor, not because the business opportunity is poor. It's an amazing business opportunity, but because they would not have been able to give legitimate returns to the investor. So if we want to attract good quality entrepreneurs, which is the basis for a good high quality sector and high quality education, then we really have to remove the not-for-profit clause. And otherwise we won't see any innovation, any energy in this sector.
And last word to you, Prabhat, in a line.
Sorry, Dilip, I'll take more than one line, but I'll be very specific because, we have always at Fikira been, have had an approach of working with the government to find solutions. And we have a real solution available to us in front of us. There's an opportunity to do that. The new national education policy is in the making, and, it hasn't come out yet. It also talks about completely reviewing the Right to Education Act, which is the only central act that deals with school education in this country. Otherwise, school education is a state subject. So in the review of Right to Education Act, if three things are incorporated at this point of time, and which already has best practice examples happening in few states, it's not that we have to reinvent the wheel. It should provide a definition of who can set up a school, which should allow all three kinds: government investments, pure philanthropic investments, and for-profit investment, because they all have room, space, opportunity to play.
Correct.
Second, it should provide for a self-regulatory framework for recognition and monitoring of schools by the state. Because what happens today, a principal's time, which 100% is deserved by the students, 70% of that gets spent in administrative issues or dealing with, and that's how the quality suffers. And the third thing, what the Right to Education Act should do, should also prescribe for a fee regulatory, framework, which is again on a self-regulatory autopilot basis. UP has shown how it can be done. If these three things are done in a central act, all states will follow, and the deal is done. It will be an open market. You'll have HDFC schools, which started with 2-3 schools, maybe setting up 100 schools, and you'll see the kind of competition that will happen, and consumer will be the winner. One last thing that I would say is it's a very important statistic which we are working. Schools are always considered a political scapegoat because they say that on the other side, the parents are the voting bank. Just a very simple statistic. As per the latest UDICE data, there are more than 3.03 lakh unaided private schools in the country. I'm not talking about aided. On a very modest average of imagining, because big schools employ 1,400 people. On a very modest average, if each school employs, say, on an average 100 people directly, indirectly, including the rickshawala and the driver, that's an employment to more than 3 crore people in the country.
30 million.
30 million, 3 crore.
that's a livelihood of 12 to 14 crore people, right? And so there are not more than 2, 3, 4 sectors in the country which give employment at such a scale, and that too in a knowledge economy. So they also are vote banks.
Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry we have to rush through this a bit. I would have loved to continue this discussion further. Unfortunately, I've not also been able to, there's some questions that have come up from the public. Unfortunately, I've not been able to do justice to them because you all made such fascinating points that I perhaps overshot. Sorry about that, Ruchika. Anyway, thank you very much. Thank you very much to Central Square, Omidyar, and panelists sparing the time. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Good night.
Thank you, Dilip. Thank you, everyone in the panel, for that wonderful discussion. The time has really flown by and we're really over. So before we close the event, I'd like to call upon Namita Dalmia to deliver the vote of thanks. Namita is the Director of Investments at Omidyar Network India. She leads the strategy and investments in education sector and played a really critical role in developing this report. So over to you, Namita.
Thank you, Ruchika. First of all, let me thank you all for attending the launch of the State of the Sector report on private schools. It's fascinating to see it at peak about 550 people attending and even staying with us for almost 2 hours. So thank you so much for your participation. We are very grateful to our keynote speakers, Mr. Amitabh Kant and Mohandas Pai, for setting the stage and sharing their commitment to the sector. Thank you to all our panelists for enriching the discussion with their experiences, ideas on regulatory reforms, and empowering parents to both understand and demand for quality. I would also like to thank everyone who actually contributed to making this report possible. In our course of developing this report, we reached out to many, many stakeholders, including policymakers, researchers, service providers, school owners. It's very difficult to name them all here, but thank you for your generosity of time and support. Last but not the least, please join me in thanking CSF Private Schools team for anchoring and drafting the first of its kind seminal report. The strategic communication teams also work very closely with the Omidyar Network India team to make this event a success. So thank you very much. Finally, we hope that this report and event have been very important to deepen the understanding and appreciation for the private school sector and need to focus on learning outcomes. I think this is just a first step. We now need to work and build up these discussions, whether we are policymakers or philanthropists, private schools or parents, or any other stakeholder. We have issues to address and insights to act on. So let's act, enable, as well as hold private schools accountable on delivering better learning outcomes for millions of Indian children. Thank you. So with that, Ruchika.
Thank you, Namita, for those words. I couldn't have put it better myself, and a great note to end this event. Thank you again, everyone, from our keynote speakers to panelists to attendees for participating. We'll be sharing the report on our social media channels, and it's also available on our website. We shared the links in the chat window. So with that, I'd like to end the event. Thank you, everyone.